Welcome to On Strike, a production of Workers Strike Back. I'm Emily MacArthur.
And I'm Kshama Sawant. Today's episode is an exclusive interview with Shawn Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers Union. On Strike interviewed Brother Fain this past weekend at Labor Notes, which is a biennial national labor conference. We spoke with Fain about the union's historic victory last week in Chattanooga at the Volkswagen plant with a stunning 73% of workers voting yes. The Chattanooga plant was the first ever non-US automaker to be unionized in the US, and the win has potential to start a chain reaction and catapult UAW's effort to organize the rest of the auto industry in the United States. The victory was inspired by the record gains won by last year's UAW strike of the big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, and was driven by bottom-up rank-and-file organizing.
It was a wake-up call for a lot of people. I had people who were anti before that happened, and it got them doing their own research, and they flipped themselves. It really erupted our plant into like a frenzy of wanting to actually do something. It had a massive impact. It had people signing up for being voluntary organizers from our plant, and it was a pretty out-the-gate sprint.
The Chattanooga Organizing Committee recruited an impressive 300 co-workers as election captains, and as reported in Labor Notes, they had well over 90% coverage within the plant, coverage on every position and every line.
Congratulations from On Strike and Workers Strike Back to the Chattanooga workers, UAW, and Shawn Fain on this huge win for working people everywhere. In our interview, we talked to Brother Fain about what lessons he sees from that Chattanooga victory and what's next in UAW's major drive to organize the unorganized in the auto industry, especially in the South. You're also not going to want to miss today's interview because we asked Fain questions that labor leaders almost never get asked in interviews, including about the war in Gaza, his position on Biden, this year's presidential election, and the need for a new party for working people. Before we get to that interview, I want to remind you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you have been watching On Strike, you know that we bring interviews, political analysis, and a strategy for the working class of the kind you simply won't find in the mainstream media. Become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to organize to rebuild a fighting labor movement, and that On Strike can continue to bring the working class perspective we so badly need. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member.
After you watch the interview, stick around for our analysis of the UAW victory, our thoughts on Brother Fain's responses, and on how working people can use the momentum to rebuild a fighting labor movement. Fain was interviewed by our on-strike correspondent at Labor Notes, Julia Cobelt, who is a member of Workers Strike Back and a rank-and-file member of UAW Local 4121, which is the union representing academic student employees, postdocs, and research scientists and engineers at the University of Washington here in Seattle.
So, hey, good to talk to you.
Yeah.
My name is Julia. I'm a rank and file UAW 4121 member.
Yeah.
Excited to be here at Labor Notes with you today. First of all, just congratulations to you and all UAW rank and file for the Chattanooga union election. Yeah. Can you tell us about how UAW won this election and like what strategy did the union use? What was the role of rank and file workers at the plant?
Yeah, I think it's congratulations to the entire working class. I mean, when we win these drives, it's important for it. It builds more momentum everywhere else. But really, I just think we let the members lead it. Instead of that's one big change we tried to do since I took over was not be a top-down type of leadership structure, an authoritarian type of leader of union that we've been in the past. So it's really embracing a member-led union where the members are leading this. So, and really just keying in on the times. I mean, we talked about in our Big Three fight that Big Three had made $250 billion in the last decade, and workers went backwards. And it's even worse at the German Three and the Japanese and Korean Six. I mean, they've made double that amount. They've made $500 billion, and the workers are making less than we do. So it's really just talking facts with workers, and I do believe also what helped was anything I've done in life. I mean we all fail sometimes or we make mistakes, and the biggest thing you do is you learn from it and move forward. So with the failed attempts that happened at Volkswagen previously, we knew we kind of knew what a prelude to what was coming with, the politicians getting involved or outside groups trying to get involved. And so we really worked with the IG Metall and with the Works Council in Germany, and they actually helped with the leadership in Germany to actually stop the governor from going in the plant a couple times. And so it really, it was a worker-driven drive. I mean, we did things a lot differently this time with our organizing committee. We actually brought in some people from Region 6. I went to a leadership conference in Region 6 in January, and was really blown away by how just the passion and the energy, and it was like nothing I'd felt in a conference that I've been to in UAW. So when I came back, I talked to our team and said, I think we need to inject some life into this. Into our team down there, and so we called Director Miller and borrowed some of the staff from Region 6, and it really lifted up the whole drive. But really the workers did it. The workers, the VOC, we had a huge voluntary organizing committee in the plant, and we had members, had leads on every line, and they were responsible for getting their line, getting the majority signed up there, and we really just mapped it out, tracked it out, and it took off. And I think the workers are fed up. I mean, like workers everywhere right now in this country, in this world, they're fed up with the massive wealth inequality, and people want to change. And the only way they're going to make it happen is by organizing. So.
Yeah, no, that's really important. I think it's like the conditions of the economy right now, the workers are
You
facing,
bet.
combined with drawing these lessons from previous fights that haven't worked. In January this year, you and UAW announced the target of organizing 150,000 auto workers.
Yeah.
This will be a big breakthrough in nearly a century, right? The biggest breakthrough. Especially with most of the auto plants being located in the South.
Yeah.
So what will it take to achieve that target? The shop floor approach?
Yeah, it's member driven. I mean, the Mercedes drive. I mean, we have the election scheduled there for mid-May now, and we got the company to agree to stipulations in that election, and so I really I look forward to what's going to happen there, and I really believe, I think success breeds success. I think this win at Volkswagen, now that workers see that it can happen, my phone's blown up today with workers at non-union companies that we've been talking with already, and I mean, it gave them more life and more energy now and confidence. So I think we keep doing what we're doing. We have a strategy mapped out and a plan of attack, and so far it's working well. And I mean, I don't want to really divulge every bit of it, but
can you talk about it a little bit more, like what the strategy looks like?
Well, it's just really, when we map this out, trying to see where we get energy and where we have people moving, in bigger numbers, and then putting more focus there, and then still injecting people in other areas to get workers, ready to fight, and give them the tools they need to go into plant and do what they need to do, I mean, like I said, it couldn't have been literally in 100 days we filed for an election at Volkswagen, and 130 days we won. So in the past we spent a year or two at Volkswagen, and until we got to a vote, and I mean, so. I just think Mercedes workers, I mean, they literally, we've stayed out of the way. I mean, they literally said, we've got this, we're going to drive, we want to run this, we're there just helping where we can help. But, and it's great to see that, just to see workers that are that fed up and that energized that really just they want to make a change, and so I really believe I think we're going to win there in mid-May, and we'll have two of these dominoes fall, and I think you're just going to see more and more as we keep going.
Yeah, like the approach at Chattanooga with hundreds of worker organizers in all of the different areas. Is that kind of the approach that you think
definitely.
unions need to take? Yeah,
I mean, definitely. I mean, the more saturated you get a work site or a work location, I mean, with people that are and when other workers see that solidarity and see that network, I mean, when the companies are putting fear out there and intimidating workers, when it's not just one person, being picked on, or one person that's doing it, when there's a group of people, it makes it easier for people to get on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also want to talk a little bit about the contract fight last year, because obviously that transformed the mood in a lot of these facilities in the South that opened up this unionizing drive, right? So last year, UAW used the stand-up strike strategy, right? Of a section of the plants going on strike, one after the next. But it wasn't all workers on strike at once. So in your view, how does this compare to an all-out strike, the stand-up strike?
I mean, I just, look, both have their merits. It just depends on the situation. And we just, I love the strategy. All I knew was this, with my experience in the past with Big Three bargaining, was we couldn't keep doing things the way we've been doing them. It didn't work. And so, we had to be firm about the deadline. The deadline has to be a deadline, not a reference point. And, in the past, our leadership would the deadline was just, we'll get there and then we'll figure it out, and they would extend it. And I mean, there was no pressure, really on the company to really come to an agreement. So even just that small change, I mean, the company, I don't think really truly believed we would do what we did. And really, the other part of it was, we have our strike fund, but we wanted to figure out a way. We knew the companies were planning on an all-out. They knew me, and I think they thought that we would hit them everywhere at once. And but knowing that, we knew that they had probably mapped. We know how much is in our strike fund. They know that, and they had probably mapped out how long we could sustain a strike until the fund was in trouble. So, we started thinking, how do we utilize this fund as efficiently as possible and get the maximum effect, and so we can draw this thing out as long as, if it's a year or two, whatever it's got to be, we can do it. And so really, we came up with the stand-up theme and it gave us such great options, and really it gave us so much power at the bargaining table. And with the contract campaign, we ran our first ever contract campaign, sadly to say, that we had never ran one before in Big Three bargaining, and it really got the members. Rallied around the issues, and by the time we were ready to go on strike, I mean, the members were repeating the talking points. They knew it, and they knew why we were out there, and they were fired up. And when the company saw that, when they saw that workers were pissed off if they didn't get called to go on strike, I mean, that's a lot. That gives you so much power at the bargaining table. So it really. And there were weeks we didn't know who we were going to hit or when we were going what plants. There were times we waited till the day of and made a decision. So it kept them guessing, and it gave us a lot of leverage and a lot of power. So and it was a group of us, it was kind of the fruition of a group of us, sitting down and really trying to figure out how do we make this work, and be able to inflict as much pain as possible, and get the maximum result we can, but also utilize our resources the best we can, and so it was worked out great.
Yeah, I mean, talking about leveraging the power of the working class, and your call for a general strike, May 1st, 2028.
Oh, you bet. Yeah.
That would be
that's the next
a
step.
Huge next step for the whole working class. So what is it going to take for us to build towards that concretely?
I mean, we're having conversations with a lot of other union leaders and unions, not just in America but all over the globe. And I just think we have to. We're taking on global corporations and global businesses, and they act globally and they attack us. They pit worker against worker. North against South in America, nation against nation, and we have to come together. And the only way we're going to defeat that is if we come together and we fight together and we stand up for one another. And so that's the ultimate goal. We got to quit talking about it. We got to start doing it. And I just think the May 1st, 2028 deadline. There's such a significance with the date and with international solidarity. And I really believe. The COVID pandemic, I mean, if there was a silver lining in that at all, it was the fact that I think it really was a great example of the power that working class people have if we use it. You take the fast food industry. People at McDonald's and those places quit going to work because they weren't going to leave the house for $12 an hour to risk their life. And what happened? They started raising the wages to $20 an hour, $25 an hour to get people to come to work. And so to me, that was a great lesson in the power we have if we withhold our labor, and union or not. So I really think it's labor's job to lead that fight and really rally workers around the power we have if we unite, if we organize, and so I really look forward to what's to come, rallying around the May 1st.
Yeah, I mean, there's like hundreds of thousands of unorganized workers
You
as
bet.
well that should
Yeah.
be a part of this
Yeah.
movement for
Yeah.
a general strike, and we need to like bring them into this
Yeah.
struggle too.
You bet.
And I'm sure you've heard about like efforts to organize Amazon,
Yep.
especially the KCBG Kentucky Air Hub. How important do you think unionizing Amazon is, and what is your message to the workers at KCBG who are taking on Amazon?
I mean, it's all the same fight. I mean, it doesn't matter what the business is. It doesn't matter where it is. We all live the same reality, and I think our Big Three campaign was an example of that, because 75% of Americans supported us in that fight. It wasn't because they were tied to auto. It was just the fact that the issues we were talking about, dignity on the job, a livable wage, a retirement security, health care, everyone, 75% of Americans support us because they're all living that. Everyone is going backwards and are struggling. And so, to those workers, I just, stay in the fight, I believe we all have to rally around them and support them and find ways to get creative. No matter who's organizing them or who, it doesn't matter what union it is. It's just a fact labor's got to support labor. We got to support workers everywhere and help them win justice on the job.
Yeah, they could take some lessons from, the successes at Chattanooga.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about like how much public support the Big Three strike had, and like unions in general right now have so much public support.
Yeah.
They're more popular than like either political party is, more popular than a lot of like government institutions. I think like unions should seize on this support, and I was excited to have my international union pass a crucial resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. But then I was a little disappointed when after that UAW also endorsed Biden for the election, who is obviously playing a horrible role in continuing this war. Do you think that those two things are kind of in tension, contradictory to one another?
I don't think they're contradictory. I mean, but one or two people is going to be president of the United States. That's very apparent right now. And we didn't make an endorsement when we were being pressured to a year prior to that, and we didn't for a reason. That we expect, results. We expect support. President Biden did support us in our fight. I mean, support us in a lot of areas that we hadn't been getting support. But at the end of the day, at all costs, we cannot risk a Trump presidency. It'll be a disaster. It'll take us backwards in every avenue. And so we still talk to the Biden administration weekly about the ceasefire. We've been meeting, myself and a lot of other labor leaders have been meeting with the White House regularly, talking about that they need to take action and it needs to change. And we're going to keep that pressure on, and we have expectations there, and we expect something to happen there. But a bigger concern for me is, the uncommitted votes and stuff was, I think it was good for voters to take a stand, to send a message that, somebody better wake up and rally to this cause and help end the violence and the killing the concern I have is simply we know where. I have a really good idea where this is going to go if the other person gets elected. I believe he'll be standing right there shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu, and they'll completely annihilate the Palestinians, and doesn't make what's going on right now right. I do believe there has to be swift action. We've got to stop supplying this war, and we need to just cut them off until that something is done. And they've made small changes so far, and I do believe I'm optimistic that they're going to take more action in that, but we'll see. Like I said, we're not going to stop talking about it. We're not going to stop pressuring them, and there's a lot of other labor leaders other than myself that are doing the same thing. So, and we're doing it together. So.
Yeah, I think it's important that the small changes that we've seen are only the result of pressure from mass movements, right? And Workers Strike Back was calling for supporting the uncommitted vote to have like the biggest uncommitted vote possible, right? Because we think it's super important to, you know, vote against Biden. And we're also calling for people to vote against Biden and Trump in the general election because we think that we need our own party. We need a working class political party, and you know, is anti-war. We'll fight for things like Medicare for all. Do you think that the labor movement could have more leverage if we refuse to endorse these warmongering candidates?
I mean, look, I've said this for decades, you know, that, you know, endorsements need to be earned, not freely given, because we've made a habit, you know, especially organized labor has made a habit of just endorsing candidates with no expectations. And so I think we have to, you know, set expectations, and that should affect it. But I mean, I've always been an advocate that, you know, if labor, you know, if we got organized and you know, whether it's creating a party or just getting behind the right candidates and finding candidates that are going to 100% identify with our values and take care of working class people, then we do what we do. And you know, I don't have all the answers there, but you know, I've always, I'm always willing to, you know, try new things and adopt new strategies and see what works. I mean,
do you think we should endorse candidates that represent our values and our views and are strongly anti-wars?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you know, for us as a union, we've always been, you know, I mean, I think we stand just for human rights. I mean, you know, I mean, sometimes war is necessary. I mean, you know, when you're drug into it. I mean, when, you know, I mean, Pearl Harbor happened, or when, you know, a situation like that happens. I mean, there's, you know, I mean, 9/11. I mean, I don't know that it has to be a war, but I mean, you have to, you know, identify what the issue was, who caused it, and figure out how do we deal with it. I mean, so it's easy to sit back and have opinions about it, but I mean, I know it's a lot different, I'm sure, when you're in that position. But at the end of the day, I mean, the needless killing of innocent human beings any human being should stand against that. I mean, it's no place for it in this world. So we have to fight that. We have to stop it.
Yeah, and so an independent working class political party could be not only a place to like run candidates that are actually accountable to the working class, but also a home to organize things like this call to build for a general strike in 2028. So do you think that we can like afford to wait any longer for a new independent working class political party? Should we start building that now?
I don't have the answer to all that. I mean, I think we need to, like I said, I mean, we need to find the right candidates no matter what it is, and I mean, at the end of the day, candidates have to put up or shut up, and if they don't put up, I mean, we don't make endorsements. You know, I don't. For me, you know, this isn't just one issue to me. I mean, you know, I understand the anti-war stance, but I mean, that's not the only issue that I'm going to personally that I would vote on. I mean, we need gun reform in this country. There's a lot of different things we need to deal with, but at the end of the day, I go back to these core issues we talked about in our Big Three fight. I mean, people having livable wages, people having adequate health care, people having retirement security. You know, all those things matter to people, and it doesn't matter where they live, you know, what their race is, you know, any background. Those are the issues that matter to people. I mean, you know, work brings dignity to people, and when you have workers working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, or working multiple jobs, and they're living paycheck to paycheck, it doesn't work. And so we have to fix that, especially while, you know, 3 people in America have as much wealth as the bottom 50%. It's a crisis. So, you know, we have to act. And so to me, those are my core issues. I mean, as far as me as a person, it's not our union. Our union is a raw, diverse union, and everyone has different opinions on that and on what the issues are. And we just have to look at that and move forward and get behind the right people and keep pushing to affect change.
Yeah, and when those three people have both political parties on their side, I think as a class we need our own independent.
Well, we need to turn this entire system upside down. I mean, this, with Citizens United and all these type of rulings, I mean, it's our government has been prostituted out to the highest bidder, and that's what it is. I mean, it's these people donate large sums of money, and they run the government, and the working class people get left behind. So.
The victory at Chattanooga has the potential to be a major turning point in unionizing the American working class. What the Chattanooga workers did is an example for others to follow. Bottom-up, shop floor organizing was at the heart of this victory. Shawn Fain's approach to leading UAW is a real contrast to the methods of the prior UAW leadership in terms of his willingness to go on strike, as the UAW auto workers did last year, in terms of his ambitious attempts to organize the unorganized in the auto industry, and in terms of the inspiring language of class struggle that he uses. All of this is a very welcome departure from the status quo of business unionism that has been the decades-long norm in most established unions. It's also really important that following the auto workers' victory last year, Fain made a call for a nationwide general strike in 2028 and for the contracts of all unions to align to expire on May 1st, or May Day, of 2028, with the idea of using the collective power of multiple unions to shut down significant sections of the U.S. economy. This will require serious preparation. The strike weapon is a muscle that most current union members have yet to use, and the ability to use it well doesn't come automatically. The next 4 years will need to see pre-strike picketing, rallies, and many smaller strikes as we build up the pressure to win the huge changes that workers need. The major gains won through last year's UAW strike at the big three automakers were the main source of inspiration for the Chattanooga Volkswagen workers. On Strike has already covered in detail the victory from the strike last year. We also talked about the need to draw the right lessons from the strike in order to have the strongest strategies and tactics going forward to rebuild a fighting labor movement. As we have said before, unfortunately, in our view, Fain's stand-up strike strategy was not the most effective approach. The idea of workers going on strike is hated by the bosses precisely because, under capitalism, it is the withholding of labor by the working class that shuts down the profit machine of the capitalist class. So even with only a fraction of the power of UAW members used in the stand-up strike strategy, with never more than a third of the workforce on strike, auto workers succeeded in forcing the companies to make major concessions. But there's no escaping the reality that UAW workers could have won much more had they carried out or escalated continually toward an all-out strike. This is also why many UAW workers voted against the contract. The overall vote was only 64% in favor, indicating that thousands of union members believed the strike wasn't as strong as it could have been.
I think it's a victory, and I think it's a record-breaking contract, but I also think it was always going to be a record-breaking contract because it came after record-breaking concessions for decades and a record-breaking pandemic and a record-breaking inflation. So I think it's also important to notice that we can't act like we already won the world and the fight's over. And we can't now be lax in our approach. And we have to enforce these agreements, and we also have to draw attention to the fact that there are big holes in these agreements. We did not end tiers. We can say all day we did, but that's not true.
I mean, they're still a second tier because benefits-wise, we are a second tier. Anybody who was hired after 2007, we don't get pensions, we don't get retiree health care. But we did get a lot of gains. Unfortunately, our gains are things that were given up before.
We did get some great financial gains, but we still didn't get our pension. The 30 and out that used to be a staple for UAW was given up fairly early. Unfortunately, we kind of found out some of the devil in the details a little bit later on. Our plant feels sometimes that they were abandoned after the contract was passed.
Notably, the biggest no vote last year was at GM, where workers went on a long and bitter strike in 2019 with the goal of reversing the massive concessions given away by the union leadership in 2007 and 2009. That 2019 strike, by the way, took down GM's entire operations and cost the company nearly $3 billion, compared with the $1.1 billion lost by GM from last year's strike.
45% of GM workers voted against accepting the contract last year, most likely because many of the issues they struck over in 2019, in particular, pensions and retiree health care for everyone hired since 2007, remain unresolved. As On Strike has pointed out, Fain's stand-up strike strategy also failed to use its leverage fully, even in terms of the plants targeted for the strike. None of the first 3 plants to go on strike were any of the company's most profitable plants, like those that produced the Ford F-150 or the Chevy Silverado or the Dodge Ram 1500.
I don't think at the end of the day we actually ever tapped into our true power of the full rank and file power that we could have, and I think there was left room for more things to be won. Work-life balance being one of those things that I think would have been achievable in the last contract if maybe all of us did go out.
In the interview we just watched, Fain gave particular focus to the element of surprise as the key component that led to the victory for auto workers last year. He has also previously suggested that the surprise element was the principal driving force of the 1930s auto workers' breakthrough strike. He has talked often about how keeping the bosses guessing by not revealing which plants are about to go on strike is at the heart of forcing the bosses' hands. It is true, as we have said on this show, that at the time, in the 1930s, the novelty of the sit-down strikes caught the auto companies by surprise. It is also true that the unions used some smart tactics to keep the bosses guessing. But in our view, it is not correct to overemphasize or elevate the importance of such smaller tactical aspects of the sit-down strikes, in which the paramount feature of 1930s strategy was the fact that the workers powerfully shut down production at GM's critical plants that brought the bosses' profits to a grinding halt. By physically occupying the factory buildings, the workers kept scabs out and prevented the bosses from moving vital machinery to restart production elsewhere and starving out the strikers, as had happened so many times before. The fundamental question that decides if a strike can win, let alone win big, is one of class forces. That is, what actually hits the bosses where it hurts, in their profits and bottom line. Minimizing pain to the bosses in the name of being strategic is not, in fact, being strategic. In our view, the takeaway message of last year's UAW strike is not that the stand-up strike strategy works, but that strikes work. And all-out strikes can put that much more pressure on the bosses to concede, as well as pave the way for future strike actions. And even if the UAW leadership was not prepared to begin the strike with an all-out shutdown of all facilities, there could at least have been a continual and rapid increase of strikes that shut down production to make the strike costlier and costlier for the bosses. This is also what On Strike advocated for at the time. What was won because the stand-up strike grew to include over 45,000 workers from GM, Ford, and Stellantis, and cost the big 3 automakers billions of dollars. It was still only a third of the workforce, as we noted before, but it was enough to force major concessions.
But as many workers pointed out in unofficial social media groups, at the end of the 4-year, 8-month contract, the top rate of pay will still be less in terms of purchasing power than it was in 2006. To illustrate the difference an all-out strike would have made, in the same 41 days of the strike, UAW could have cost Ford many times more than the $1.3 billion it did cost them if all plants had been shut down, thus putting much more pressure to win something closer to UAW members' demands, which, just in terms of wages, was originally 46% demanded, not the 25% that was ultimately won. In the end, the 6-week strike cost the big 3 automakers only about a third more than what GM endured during the 40-day all-out strike in 2019. Pro-business sources estimated the total cost to the economy from the strike last year was slightly over $10 billion. This is a relative drop in the bucket compared to the enormous size of the U.S. economy, which daily produces $75 billion in gross domestic product, or about $4.5 trillion during the strike. In addition to arguing for the benefits of the surprise element of the stand-up strike strategy, Shawn Fain also places a lot of emphasis on the limitations of the strike fund. This is based on the idea of conserving the union strike fund by having a fraction, not all, of the workers go on strike. It is crucial to take seriously the preparation of the strike fund. But the amount of money in the strike fund should not be the central thing in what determines the strategy on the basis of simple arithmetic. The emphasis has to be on preparing a militant, all-out production-stopping strike.
Obviously, we know resources are limited in any organization. but we were never asked if we were willing to make more sacrifices. And we were never asked how far we wanted to take it in the terms of like, what do you think about this as you guys are rank and file? What do you think about not having strike pay, but staying out an extra 2 weeks to just rattle them a little bit more? And maybe we would have got something, right?
The militant union organizers of the 1936 to 37 General Motors sit-down strikes, many of whom were socialists or communists, strategically shut down most of General Motors without a strike fund. Such a militant strike needs to be combined with mass community support and solidarity actions by the broader labor movement. Bringing the pressure from the wider working class to bear would have cost the auto industry bosses tens of billions of dollars and put enormous pressure on them to rapidly concede to the union's demands. Unions and unionizing are more popular today than they have been in nearly 50 years. Last year saw more American workers on strike than at any time since 1986. Working people recognize what it would mean for all of us if strike actions can win important demands related to wages, pensions, healthcare, and workplace conditions. Building solidarity, including financial support from the wider working class, needs to be incorporated as a goal of strike preparation. In addition, the labor movement also needs elected officers and staff to take home no more than the average wages of the union members they represent. As some of you know, as an elected representative of working people for 10 years, Kshama only took home the average worker's wage and donated the rest of her six-figure city council salary after taxes into a working-class solidarity fund to support worker struggles and social justice movements. The UAW strike under Shawn Fain's leadership was a huge breakthrough, and in contrast to the moribund labor leadership over decades. At the same time, it should provoke questions about the kind of strike actions labor should aim for. We need to learn the right lessons from the class struggle and not to repeat the mistakes going forward. While the UAW victory is genuinely inspiring, the stand-up strike should not be held up as a model for future strikes. We need more strikes and stronger strikes that go all out and shut down production in order to rebuild a fighting labor movement, both to win higher standards of living for all workers and to challenge this bankrupt system of capitalism.
In the interview, Fain justifies the UAW endorsement of Biden on the basis of fearing a second Trump presidency. Fain says that if Trump was elected, he would, quote, stand shoulder to shoulder with Netanyahu, end quote. There's absolutely no doubt that Trump 2.0 would be horrendous. But these sorts of lesser evil arguments in support of Biden actually take pressure off Biden when in reality we need to increase that pressure. Much more importantly, invoking lesser evilism as an argument to vote for Biden turns reality and history on its head. Both the Democrats and the Republicans are parties of the billionaire class, despite their differences, as Shawn Fain himself talked about. But what Fain doesn't acknowledge is that the Democratic Party, standing primarily for Wall Street and wealthy interests, is precisely what has disenchanted millions of people and created the space for Trumpism and right-wing populism. Let's not forget that Trump's rise was preceded by the right-wing Tea Party movement, which won major gains in the 2010 midterm elections as a consequence of President Obama selling working people out on multiple fronts, including the betrayal on Medicare for All, the troop surge in Afghanistan, and record numbers of deportations of working class and poor immigrants. Right now, in a reflection of the new Cold War era we are in, billions of dollars worth of military aid is going to the legislature for both Israel and Ukraine under the leadership of Biden. This is a disaster and will only lead to a further massive cost of human lives. Meanwhile, anti-war protests are rapidly spreading at campuses across the country, demanding that universities themselves stop supporting corporations that enable the Israeli ruling class's brutal war on the people of Gaza. At this historic moment, working class leaders need to take a stand against Biden and Trump and the brutal war on Gaza, to stand with young people and workers who are protesting the war. This is why it's deeply unfortunate and contradictory that UAW's national leadership has endorsed Biden over the heads of its membership after having publicly called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. Fain says in the interview this is not a contradiction, but it's absolutely a massive contradiction.
This is a contradiction. To suggest that we're standing in solidarity with Palestinian people, and we're calling for a ceasefire, and we're aware of the tragedies that are happening over there, the tragedies that are happening with our tax dollars, and then to immediately turn around and endorse somebody that is the one kind of leading the way in this and being okay with it, I think we should have withheld our endorsement. And I think that we need to add pressure onto them. And I think these people need to they need to earn our endorsement. We said that a lot, right? We were like, whoever is running needs to earn our endorsement. I don't think showing up on a strike line for a 30-minute speech is earning anything. I think that's the bare minimum you can do when your number one slogan is that you're the most pro, like union-friendly president there is. And I honestly think that, him coming to the strike line helped him, Biden, way more than it ever helped us.
Most shocking at this moment is to hold up a specter of Trump and Netanyahu when it's Biden who has been the warmonger-in-chief, the premier representative of U.S. imperialism. Without Biden's active support, the Israeli state's genocidal war on Gaza would not even be possible. Both Biden and the Democratic and Republican parties have blood on their hands. Shawn Fain said that we need to stop supplying the war, by which I'm sure he means stopping the supply of weapons and military aid to Israel. We agree, but how is that going to happen if Biden gets anointed with uncritical support from the labor movement? Biden recently said his support for the Israeli state is quote-unquote ironclad in the context of the recent escalation between Israel and Iran, which also points towards a growing threat of a wider conflagration in the Middle East. Just this week, Biden condemned Columbia University student protesters as anti-Semitic. The labor movement needs to refuse to support Biden in solidarity with the anti-war movement and needs to begin building a new party for the working class. But such a new party cannot be built if we succumb to lesser evilism every presidential election.
And it really feels like you're trying to pick a weaker enemy rather than your ally. We could use some equalizers in that system.
Yeah, I mean, the Democratic Party is supposed to be the working class party, but we see, as we've seen in plenty of other presidencies, that it's not really for us. So yeah, I would say that we probably do need a party for the working class.
And I would piggyback off of what you guys are saying about having our own political party. You got to think about it. All your politicians, 90% of them are millionaires. Some are billionaires. How they can relate to us when you're not really the working class? You inherit your money.
We need to have a labor party. We need to have a party that is for the people.
I'm not going into a booth anymore and voting against my gut. And I'm not going into a booth anymore and voting for somebody that I know is going to end up hurting me because I'm too afraid of what the other outcome is. It shouldn't be like that.
This year, for example, working people should reject both Biden and Trump and support the strongest independent left anti-war candidate on the ballot, whether Jill Stein or Cornel West. By continuing to support Biden, Labor leadership is throwing away the massive potential leverage they could exert on him in the context of a closely contested election. Passing a resolution for a permanent ceasefire, but then endorsing Biden, is the type of doublespeak that ends up stymieing the anti-war movement.
Thanks again to UAW President Shawn Fain for interviewing with On Strike, and congratulations again to him and the Chattanooga Volkswagen workers for this historic victory. If it seems we've brought forward some criticisms, it's because there's so much at stake, and our task is to draw out the best possible strategies. And we cannot be shy about having frank political discussions in the working class movement while also celebrating the victories won. The crisis of capitalism, the bankruptcy of this system, is becoming clearer and clearer for a new generation of young people. We have to fight for every victory, to win every union drive, to win every reform we can. But in doing so, we cannot give cover to those like Biden who are fighting against the interest of the working class. And we cannot support their wars.
On Strike provides an analysis from the point of view of working class people about the problems we face in our daily lives under capitalism. In every episode, On Strike also presents a strategy for working class movements to fight back. On Strike talks about why it's crucial that every fight for change emphasize the need to build working class solidarity and is linked with organizing a powerful challenge to the political establishment and the capitalist system itself. This is something you won't find on mainstream media. That's why we need your support for On Strike. Subscribe to our On Strike channel on YouTube and like this video and become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to organize to rebuild a fighting labor movement. By becoming a Workers Strike Back member, you can also help this broadcast. We don't run any ads, as Emily said before. We don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on working people's donations. Go to workersstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. Solidarity.